So many questions and so few answers. Welcome to Perspective Thinking. Welcome to the very first segment of Perspective Thinking, and I'm your host, Stephen Leslie. This series is dedicated to looking at all the pressing issues that the world is dealing with and helping our viewers to see these problems from a biblical perspective, hence the name of our show. Mass shootings may be one of, if not the biggest issue in America today, particularly America. Just take a look at this Newsweek article and the suggestions that they give, for America to follow. And, they look at a couple of the countries and they're saying, for like Germany, in Germany you have to buy a gun. To buy a gun, anyone under the age of 25 has to pass a psychiatric evaluation. Then they say in Finland, handgun license applicants are only allowed to purchase firearms if they can prove they're active members of regulated shooting clubs, right? You see here now in Italy, it says to secure a gun permit, one must establish a genuine reason to possess a firearm and pass a background check, considering both criminal and mental health records. It says in France, firearm applicants must have no criminal record and pass a background check that considers a reason for the gun purchase and evaluates the criminal, mental, and health records of the applicant, right? And these are the countries that, obviously this is Newsweek and this is their coverage of it. And, the question we want to ask is, why is this gun control issue, why is gun rights issue such a great issue in America? I mean, it all boils down to the American Constitution. I got to looking at some of the constitutions of other countries around the world, like Afghanistan, Albania, and even the countries mentioned in the Newsweek article like Australia, Germany, and Italy. The constitutions of all these countries have one thing in common. And what is that? None of them, and I mean none of them, contain anything about gun rights. Yes, there were particular laws drafted to deal with specific cases or issues, but not one thing is mentioned in their constitution about the right to bear arms. Now, hopefully this is not a hyperbole, but America just might have one of the only constitutions that has a very pronounced amendment on gun rights. And the reason for that is rooted in the great history of this country. The wrangling that occurred between the Federalists and Anti-Federalists in the 1700s was over the role of government and whether the government was overstepping its boundaries as simply the overseer and executioner of the people's will. By extension, the right to bear arms became an issue that needed to be addressed, and probably the most instructive founding father in regards to this problem was Thomas Jefferson. The following quotations are usually attributed to Thomas Jefferson, and please note that I say that they're attributed to him and not necessarily that he indeed said them. Now, the first quotation states, "No free man shall be debarred the use of arms within his own lands." The second quotation states, "The strongest reason for the people to retain the right to keep and bear arms is as a last resort to protect themselves against tyranny and government." So why is the Constitution the key to answering the gun control issue? Let's look at the issues at hand, and we will come back and answer that question later in the segment. I know I'm handling this situation a bit late, but better late than never, right? Anyway, one of the latest mass shootings in America was in San Bernardino, California. It was alleged that Tashin Malik and her husband Saeed Rizvan Farouk went into Inland Regional Center and shot and killed 14 people and wounded 21. Now, what was the media's reaction to this, right? Now, let's take a look at Daily News a day after the event and how they covered it. And this is the New York Daily News. And they covered it by showing this cover, right? It says 14 dead in California mass shooting. And big and bold, is God isn't fixing this, right? And they speak about Ted Cruz and his tweet about our prayers are with the victims, their families, and their first responders in San Bernardino, Lindsey Graham, Rand Paul, all of them speaking about their prayers being with God. And Daily News responds, God isn't fixing this. Now this is, I was minus this article, Daily News doing this, I would never even publish a video on this. But this caught my attention and, became something necessary to speak on, right? And so we see here that this is how the media is presenting certain things to kind of construct things or bring people to a way of thinking, or to neutralize and immobilize people to one way of thinking, right, on this issue. And we see at the bottom it says, as latest batch of innocent Americans, and as you can see in the clip here, innocent Americans is in red, are left lying in pools of blood, cowards who could end gun scourge continue to hide behind meaningless platitudes. So we see here that, they obviously want people to fight against, or to at least establish better gun control laws, and they're obviously doing it through a means of manipulating people through media outlets like the Daily News. Let's take a look at, the New York Post. They're being as equally dramatic and sensationalistic. Now, I don't expect anything different from the Post, as it is owned by News Corp, or might I say Fox, if you're familiar with that name. I mean, let's expect Republican right-wingers to be overly expressive about pejoratively depicting Islam, right? I mean, let's look at this cover, right? It says terror-eyed as couple slaughters 14 in California. And then bigger bold, again, they put Muslim killers. Now we have to be able to look at media and see how they reflect certain things. American mainstream media is very sensationalistic, and we have to understand that. So, if we get caught up in what they're saying, we also begin to think the way that they do. So let's look at these things from perspective, right? I just want to show you the next thing is this screenshot. And, at least the New York Times is a bit more conservative in general in their reporting. They, instead of, being very specific and trying to manipulate people, they just make it clear here that there was a shooting in San Bernardino and that the 2 suspects are dead. Nothing major here, nothing that seems to scream sensationalist. Los Angeles Daily News, was also a bit more general, but they did say that the FBI is looking into it as a possible act of terrorism, right? So that's another thing. But let's continue, right? I said, however, what led me to do this segment and this series on a whole was the New York Daily News front page, and we're just gonna put that up again. And that was the one thing that was the inspiration for this particular video, and basically this whole series. As much as Daily News reporting was a politicizing of the incident, it was also somewhat of an indictment against the idea of a just and loving God. It is what we would call a Theodicean issue. Now, Theodicean is simply the adjective of the word theodicy. What is theodicy? The word theodicy comes from 2 Greek words, the word theos and the word dike, which means justice. Being surrounded by so much evil in the world, mankind is naturally led to question whether or not if the God that created him is just and filled with love. If God is ultimately benevolent in all that he does and is, surely he cannot behold evil and do nothing about it, right? It is a fair question. And Epicurus, the ancient Greek philosopher, posed an interesting question. He asked, is God willing to prevent evil but not able? Then he is not omnipotent. Is he able but not willing? then he is malevolent. Is he both able and willing? Then whence cometh evil? Is he neither able nor willing? Then why call him God? Right? And this is Epicurus, the ancient Greek philosopher who, where you see this first issues of theodicy beginning. And what are the, of this particular incident in San Bernardino, what are the possible Theodicean effects, right? And I listed at least 3 possible effects that people can come away with. And by Theodicean, I mean, what are people's thoughts about God after an incident like this, right? And the first thought that I listed was that 1, it makes God look as though he's not active in the affairs of humanity. Point 2 is that it makes God look as though he doesn't care, right? This is how some people looking at this event would view it. And for some people, it surely does make God look weak, right? And these are some of the what we would call Theodicean issues or Theodicean ramifications of a situation like this, right? I mean, if all that was just mentioned is true, who would want to worship God, right? Let alone want to get to know him. I will propose, however, that God has his own way of answering these questions concerning him and how he ultimately will solve the problem of evil. Go to your bedroom, dresser, or bathroom mirror and look directly into that mirror, and what you see there is a solution to this problem. Yes, it's you and it's me. Evil doesn't exist outside of human beings, but it exists within their hearts and minds, and therefore we must meet the problem exactly where it lies. To those that are afflicted by evil, what is our response? Do we sit back and say, it's not my problem? I mean, when we behave that way, are we not doing the same thing that we're accusing God of? I'm not suggesting that God behaves this way, but if we have that reaction to evil, we would be hypocrites and we would not be fulfilling God's desire and injunction to do justice. And I just want to look briefly at what Scripture has to say about this concept of doing justice, right? In Genesis 18 and verse 19, God speaking about Abraham, he says, "For I know him that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord to do justice and judgment, that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he has spoken of him." Let's look at 1 Kings 10 and verse 9, right? It says, "Blessed be the Lord thy God, which delighted in thee to set thee on the throne of Israel, because the Lord loved Israel forever. Therefore made he thee king to do judgment and justice. Defend the poor and fatherless," Psalm 82 and verse 3, "do justice to the afflicted and needy." Proverbs 21 and verse 3, "To do justice and judgment is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice." Isaiah 56 and verse 1, "Thus saith the Lord, keep ye judgment and do justice, for my salvation is near to come, and my righteousness to be revealed." Right? So we see here that doing justice or doing right is something that God loves to do. And one of the things that we see here is that he told them, defend the poor and fatherless, do justice to the afflicted and needy. And so there are people who are going to be afflicted, like in this San Bernardino issue. How do we deal with it, right? And I think even as sensationalistic as that New York Daily News article was, it does call out the hypocrisy of most in these situations where, you know, people go through suffering and no one is there to try to comfort them, right? Now, what the reason for what New York Daily News is doing is to get, you know, these particular people to make particular legislation to curb gun control. And that is the twisting of the arm, it's the manipulating of society to get them to look at this gun control issue the way that they see it. And this is where we have to be careful to not allow the media to get us to think the way that they do, because this is why history is so important. This is how societies brainwash their citizens, right? You have to have a particular media outlet and, you know, a way of presenting things to have your, you know, population see things the way that government sees them, right? And so this is why media outlets are bought out by the government, are bought out by particular secret entities, and, you know, they reveal, they go about this sensations campaign and, you know, make these crazy videos or crazy newspaper clippings, right? But this is a concept of doing justice, and this is what is important for us to explore. Now, we must understand that God is doing his part to bring justice to the afflicted, and he does this to soften your heart and mind, and to truly reveal love to those around us. We can see those around us in need, and instead of helping them, we blame God, who we cannot see, for all of the suffering. Now, it makes me question, I wonder, who is worthier of the sterner judgment, us or God, right? Now that we have, you know, just briefly looked at the Theodicean side effects of the gun control issue, let's look at the eschatological. And eschatological is simply a word for last day. You know, eschatological ramifications, which brings our focus back to the American Constitution. Of the 27 amendments developed over a 200-year period, we have zeroed in on one in particular, and that is the Second Amendment, which states, "A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." Right? Now, how does this amendment and the gun control issue reflect upon the upcoming eschatological or last day situations that will play out? The book of Revelation may shed a bit of light on this. In Revelation 13, there are two beasts that are highlighted, and these beasts signify or represent two political or world powers, one being the papacy of Roman Catholic or the Roman Catholic Church of the Dark Ages, and the other being the United States of America. Now, just take my word for it. Actually, not really. Please study it for yourself. However, in Revelation 13, the first beast, which is a papacy, arises out from the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And on those 10 horns were 10 crowns, signifying kingship or rule. The second beast, which is America, arises out of the earth, and has 2 horns, which again is representative of rule, but this time it is rule according to the principle of liberty and democracy. But the Bible then says that this second beast begins to behave like the first beast and speak like a dragon, right? And we know that if it's a beast, it's a political power, and it begins to speak. A political power can only speak through its laws, right? And speaking like a dragon indicates that it would begin to speak with more of a threatening or forceful tone, telling its inhabitants that it must adhere to the laws of the state, right? Or to even social pressures. Because right now, the whole world, especially America, is being oriented to or mobilized to the social pressures surrounding them. And most people who have accepted certain norms that are norms in society have been pressured into them, right? And this is why in this series in Perspective Thinking, we want to look at particular issues like this so that we're not pressured into a particular way of thinking, right? So, and it reveals now in Revelation that by the time we get to Revelation 17, it is seen that the beasts no longer are wearing crowns, which indicates a breakdown in the sovereignty of states and the collective surrendering of the nations to a one world government, right? This is the direction that we're all going right now, and this is where these scenarios fit in. So again, how does the Second Amendment tie in with all of this? The Second Amendment in recent years has been taking a lot of hard hits, but it stood up pretty well because of a few faithful patriots. Now, I must put forth a disclaimer. I'm in no way a fan of guns or any instrument meant to cause harm to my fellow human being. In fact, I wish guns were never created. The issue here is not about guns and their regulation. The issue here is about the survival of the United States Constitution. Now, apart from the 21st Amendment's repudiation of the 18th Amendment, if the Second Amendment is revoked, it will be the first time an amendment meant to preserve the liberty of Americans would be repealed. Sorry. You see, the 18th Amendment, as much as it did violate the right of Americans everywhere to drink alcohol, it came from the influence of 19th century temperance movement reformers hoping to preserve the morality of America. However, a hit at the Second Amendment is more an attempt of enforcing big government and overthrowing the Constitution. How, you may ask? Since all 27 amendments are meant to uphold the law and liberty of all Americans, an attempt to overthrow one amendment is still a holistic attack on the Constitution. So why attack the Second Amendment first? Right? I mean, they could have attacked any other amendment. There are 27 of them. Simple. It's the easiest one to attack because many Americans today are not well read in their own history, and they are controlled and programmed by a sensationalist media. Yep, a nation full of people immobilized by their feelings rather than using their reason. Just take a look at this video of Obama addressing the gun control issue.
Our unalienable right to life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness, those rights were stripped from college kids in Blacksburg and Santa Barbara, and from high schoolers at Columbine, and from first graders in Newtown. First graders. And from every family who never imagined that their loved one would be taken from our lives by a bullet from a gun. Every time I think about those kids, it gets me mad. And by the way, it happens on the streets of Chicago every day. So, all of us need to demand a Congress brave enough to stand up to the gun lobby's lies. All of us need to stand up and protect its citizens. All of us need to demand governors and legislators and businesses do their part to make our communities safer. We need the wide majority of responsible gun owners who grieve with us every time this happens and feel like your views are not being properly represented to join with us to demand something better.
Now, whether or not the tears of the president are sincere, millions of Americans were tearfully impacted by his speech and would most likely take his stance on the issue, and they would not see an issue with repealing the Second Amendment. Right? I mean, I know that seems like a stretch, but as long as people are immobilized again by their feelings, this is a decision that will become easier for them to make as time goes on. And we know, over time, people try to wear us down emotionally about making certain decisions that they want us to make for them, right? And so people keep going at it, working at people's emotions, and this is basically the same thing that the media is doing. And eventually, people will see things from the way that they're seeing it, and will make a decision to stand with those individuals, whether they're right or wrong, right? So, you know, they would take a stance with him on this issue. And when the Second Amendment is gone, I think the other 26 amendments should write their last will and testament because they will be next on the hit list, right? With the Constitution gone, where does America lie? Where does America go from here? Oh yeah, they would be yoked up with the one world government and they will be controlled by the beast from the bottomless pit. Now, what I'm about to say is not meant to be critical of anyone, but if you think you're doing your moral duty to assist in the revocation of the Second Amendment, please think again, because you very well might be paving the way to the destruction of your nation's liberty and that of the rest of the world. Again, this is Stephen Leslie for Perspective Thinking. Thanks for watching.